I woke up that Tuesday morning and my children were gone. Their beds were made. Their favorite stuffed animals were missing. The closet was half empty. And there was a note on the kitchen table that said, "Do not try to find us. My name is Amanda Sullivan, and I am an American woman who lost my children in Japan, not because I was a bad mother, not because I did anything wrong, but because my husband took them first." And in Japan, there is a rule that most foreigners do not understand until it is too late. Whoever has physical possession of the children wins custody. Always. No exceptions. This is the story of how I went from being a full-time devoted mother to having no rights whatsoever to see my own children. How a legal system I thought would protect me instead told me that because my husband took them before I could, they now belonged to him. And how I have spent the last 6 years fighting a battle I will probably never win, trying to see my children for 2 hours once a month while they slowly forget I ever existed. If you are a foreign parent living in Japan, or if you are considering marrying a Japanese national and moving to Japan, I need you to hear every word of this, because what happened to me happens to hundreds of parents every single year in Japan, foreign mothers and foreign fathers both, and the law will not help you. The police will not help you. No one will help you. You will be completely powerless. I met Kenji Tanaka in Seattle in 2012. I was 29 years old, working as an English teacher at a private language school in downtown Seattle. I loved my job. I loved helping people improve their communication skills, watching them gain confidence as their English got better, seeing them achieve their goals. It was fulfilling work that felt like I was making a real difference in people's lives. Kenji was 32 years old. He had come to Seattle on a 2-year work assignment for his company, a large Japanese manufacturing firm based in Tokyo. He needed to improve his business English for meetings and presentations, so his company enrolled him in our school for intensive classes. I was not his teacher initially, but we met in the common area one day when he was struggling with an assignment. I helped him understand some confusing grammar rules and we started chatting. He was intelligent, thoughtful, polite in that distinctly Japanese way. He had this quiet confidence about him that I found appealing. He asked me questions about American culture, about Seattle, about what it was like growing up in the Pacific Northwest. I asked him about Japan, about Tokyo, about his work. We started having coffee after his classes, then occasional dinners, then longer conversations that stretched late into the evening. Within a few months, we were dating officially. Kenji was different from anyone I had dated before. He was considerate, remembered small details about things I had mentioned in passing, brought me little gifts for no reason. He made me feel valued and appreciated in a way I had not experienced before. When his work assignment was scheduled to end after 2 years, he asked me if I would consider coming to Tokyo with him. He said his company had agreed to extend his stay in Seattle for 6 more months so I could get my affairs in order. He said he wanted to marry me, to build a life together in Japan. He said I could continue teaching English in Tokyo, that there were many opportunities for native English speakers, that I would love the city. I was hesitant. Moving to another country felt like an enormous decision, leaving my family, my friends, my entire life in Seattle. But I was deeply in love with Kenji, and he promised me that if I was not happy in Tokyo after giving it a real try, we could move back to the United States. He said he was willing to live in America if that was what I ultimately wanted. His career was flexible enough that he could potentially transfer back, so I said yes. We got married in a small ceremony in Seattle before we moved, with both our families present. My parents liked Kenji. They thought he was kind, stable, respectful, someone who would take care of me. They were sad I was moving so far away, but they supported my decision. They said if anyone could make an international marriage work, I could. Moving to Tokyo in 2014 was overwhelming. Everything was different. The language barrier was real, even though I started intensive Japanese lessons immediately. The culture was so foreign to me. The sheer size and density and energy of the city took my breath away. But Kenji helped me adjust. He found us a nice apartment in Setagaya, a residential ward that was quieter than central Tokyo. He helped me navigate the ward office to get my residence card. He introduced me to his friends and family. He helped me find a good teaching job at an international school. His parents were traditional but polite to me. His mother, Yuki, spoke very limited English, so communication was difficult at first. She was reserved, formal, watched me carefully, like she was assessing whether I was good enough for her son. His father, Hiroshi, was even more formal, very traditional Japanese man of his generation, but they seemed to accept me as Kenji's wife, even though I was foreign. For the first 2 years in Tokyo, life was genuinely good. I loved teaching at the international school. The kids were wonderful, eager to learn, from families all over the world. I was learning Japanese, slowly but steadily. Kenji and I would explore different neighborhoods in Tokyo on weekends, try new restaurants, visit temples and shrines, take trips around Japan to Kyoto and Osaka and Hokkaido. I felt like I was building a life there, putting down roots. When I got pregnant in 2016, Kenji was absolutely thrilled. We found out we were having a girl, and he actually cried during the ultrasound appointment when we saw her on the screen. He said he had always wanted a daughter first. Sakura was born in January of 2017. 6 pounds, 9 ounces of absolute perfection. Dark hair like her father, my blue eyes. I loved her so completely it physically hurt sometimes. This overwhelming love that consumed me entirely. Kenji was a good father at first. He helped when he could, though his work schedule at the company was demanding. Japanese corporate culture expects long hours, and he was often at the office until late evening. But on weekends he was present and engaged. His mother Yuki came over frequently to help with Sakura, which I appreciated initially, but which started to feel invasive over time. She had very strong opinions about everything: how I should hold Sakura, how often I should feed her, what she should wear, when she should sleep, and she spoke to Sakura only in Japanese, even though I wanted her to learn both languages equally. I tried to set gentle boundaries with Yuki, saying I appreciated her help, but I also needed to figure things out as a new mother. She acted offended. When I talked to Kenji about it, he said his mother was just trying to help, that she had raised 3 children successfully, that this was how Japanese families worked with everyone involved in childcare. He said I needed to be more understanding of Japanese culture and family dynamics. When Sakura was 18 months old, I got pregnant again with a boy. Kenji was even more excited this time. In Japanese culture, having a son to carry on the family name is very significant. Takeshi was born in October of 2018, another healthy, beautiful baby. But he was a more difficult infant than Sakura had been. He cried constantly, barely slept, struggled with nursing. I was exhausted and overwhelmed trying to care for a demanding newborn and an energetic toddler. With 2 young children, I stopped working at the school. It was just too difficult to manage teaching and caring for Sakura and Takeshi. Kenji said it was fine, that his salary was sufficient, that it was actually better for the children if I stayed home with them full-time. I agreed. I wanted to be present for them anyway during these crucial early years, but staying home full-time in Japan as a foreign mother was incredibly isolating. I did not have a network of friends the way I had in Seattle. The other mothers at the playground or at parent and child groups were polite but distant. They spoke rapid Japanese I could not fully follow. I felt like an outsider constantly. I poured all my energy into Sakura and Takeshi. They became my entire world, my only real companionship during those long days when Kenji was at work. Things started to deteriorate in our marriage when Sakura was about 3 and Takeshi was 18 months. Kenji became increasingly critical of my parenting. He said I was not raising them properly, that Sakura was speaking too much English and not enough Japanese. He said I was too permissive, too American in my approach. He said his mother had raised children successfully, and I should follow her guidance more. He spent more and more time at work and with his friends, coming home late, leaving me alone with the children for days at a time sometimes. We started fighting about his absence, about his mother's constant interference, about how isolated and unsupported I felt, about his criticism of my parenting when he was barely present himself, about money because I had no income of my own and had to ask him for everything. The fights got worse and more frequent. By the time Sakura was 4 and Takeshi was 2, I realized our marriage was falling apart. Kenji was barely present physically or emotionally. When he was home, he was critical and cold. I was miserable, drowning in isolation and exhaustion, and the thankless work of full-time childcare with no support system. I told Kenji I wanted couples counseling. He said therapy was not something Japanese people did, that we should handle our problems privately. I said I wanted to go back to the US for a visit, to see my family, to get a break. He said it was too expensive, maybe next year. There was always a reason, always an excuse. I finally told him I wanted a divorce, that I could not keep living like this, that we were both unhappy, and it was not good for Sakura and Takeshi to grow up in a house with so much tension. Kenji was surprisingly calm about it. He said okay, we could discuss the details. He suggested we have dinner to talk about it civilly. without the children around. His parents could watch Sakura and Takeshi that evening, so we could have a real adult conversation about how to move forward. I should have been suspicious of how reasonable he was being. I should have listened to the alarm bells going off in my head, but I was exhausted from fighting. I thought maybe for once we could handle something maturely, so I agreed. Kenji picked up the children that afternoon, September 15, 2020, to take them to his parents' house in Yokohama for the evening. I packed their overnight bags, included their favorite stuffed animals and blankets, made sure they had everything they needed. I kissed them goodbye. Sakura said, "See you later, Mommy." Takeshi waved his little hand and said, "Bye-bye" in his sweet baby voice. That was the last time I saw them. Kenji never came back for our dinner. He never answered his phone when I called. I tried his cell over and over, straight to voicemail every time. I called his parents' house. No answer. I drove to their house in Yokohama. All the lights were off. I knocked and knocked. No one came to the door, but I could hear Sakura crying inside. I pounded on the door, screaming for them to let me in, to let me see my children. Neighbors started coming out to see what the commotion was about. Someone threatened to call the police on me for disturbing the peace. I called the police myself. I explained that my husband had taken our children and would not give them back. The police officer who responded looked at me like I was being hysterical and dramatic. He said, "You are married to this man, correct?" I said yes. He said, "Then this is a domestic matter, not a crime. He cannot kidnap his own children if you are married." He suggested I go home and work things out with my husband like a reasonable person. I could not believe what I was hearing. My children had been taken from me, and the police were treating me like I was the problem, like I was the one being unreasonable. I immediately contacted a lawyer, an American lawyer practicing in Tokyo, who specialized in international family law. His name was Robert Chen. I explained what had happened. He said, I warned you that in Japan, physical possession is everything in custody disputes." I said, "You did not warn me. I have never talked to you before." He said, "I am sorry. I thought you were another client. But this is very bad, Mrs. Sullivan. In Japan, there is no concept of joint custody after parents separate. Only one parent gets custody, and Japanese family courts almost always give custody to whichever parent has physical possession of the children at the time of separation. Your husband now has possession. That means he has the advantage. You need to file for custody immediately." I filed the very next day. I went to family court in Tokyo and submitted a petition for custody of Sakura and Takeshi. The court scheduled a mediation session for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks. My children were gone, and I had to wait 6 weeks just for a mediation session that might not even accomplish anything. I tried everything to see them in those 6 weeks. I went back to Kenji's parents' house every single day. They never answered the door. I sent messages to Kenji begging him to let me see the children, begging him to at least let me know they were okay. He finally responded after 2 weeks with a brief message, "They are fine. You can see them once custody is determined through proper legal channels." I said they need their mother. They must be confused and scared. Please let me see them. He did not respond. I hired a private investigator to confirm the children were actually safe. The investigator was able to take photos of Kenji dropping them off at a daycare facility in Yokohama in the mornings. Sakura looked sad in the photos. Takeshi looked confused, but they appeared physically okay, which was some small comfort. Those 6 weeks were absolute hell. I barely ate or slept. I could not function. My world had ended. My children were gone, and I had no idea when or if I would see them again. The mediation session was a complete joke. It was held at the family court with a mediator, an older Japanese woman who seemed completely unsympathetic to my situation. Kenji's lawyer argued that he had been concerned about my mental health and stability, that I had been depressed and acting erratically, that he had taken the children for their own safety and well-being. He said I was not fluent enough in Japanese to properly raise Japanese children in Japanese society. He said his parents were helping with childcare, and the children were thriving in their care. My lawyer Robert presented evidence that I had been the primary caregiver for years, that I had fed them, bathed them, cared for them, been there for every moment of their lives, that Kenji had barely been present due to his work schedule, that I was a good mother, and the children desperately needed me. The mediator listened, but her face showed no emotion. She asked me how fluent I was in Japanese. I admitted I could have basic conversations, but was not fully fluent. She asked if I planned to stay in Japan long term. I said I did not know, that I might need to return to America if I could not find adequate work here without Kenji's financial support. She made notes. She asked Kenji if he planned to keep the children in Japan. He said absolutely yes. They were Japanese citizens. This was their home. He had a stable job. His parents lived nearby and could help with childcare. He could provide everything they needed. The mediation ended with no resolution. The mediator said we would need to proceed to a formal custody hearing. That hearing was scheduled for 4 months later. 4 more months. My children were being kept from me for 4 more months minimum before I would even get a chance to argue my case in front of a judge. I was allowed 1 supervised visit during that waiting period, 2 hours at a family support center with a social worker present to observe and take notes. Kenji brought Sakura and Takeshi. When they saw me, Sakura ran to me crying, asking why I had not come to see her, asking where I had been. She thought I had abandoned her. Takeshi was confused, barely seemed to recognize me. 4 months is an eternity when you are only 2 years old. I held them and cried. I tried to explain that I had been trying to see them every single day, but Daddy would not let me. The social worker told me not to say negative things about their father in front of them. I asked how else I was supposed to explain my absence. She said I should focus on enjoying the time I had now, rather than dwelling on the past. 2 hours. I got 2 precious hours with my children, and then they were taken away from me again. I watched them leave with Kenji, and I felt like I was dying. The custody hearing was finally held at Tokyo Family Court 4 months later. Kenji's lawyers went first. They argued that the children had been living with Kenji for over 4 months now and were settled and happy in their current situation. That disrupting that stability by moving them back to me would be harmful to them. That Kenji had a stable job, family support nearby, and could provide a proper Japanese upbringing for Japanese children. They presented a letter from the daycare, saying the children had adjusted well. They presented testimony from Kenji's mother, Yuki, saying both children were thriving under her care and Kenji's parenting. My lawyer, Robert, argued that I had been the primary caregiver for years before Kenji took them, that I had only been separated from the children because Kenji had essentially kidnapped them without warning or discussion, that the children needed their mother. We had letters from my family in Seattle offering to help support us financially if needed. We had photos and videos I had taken over the years, showing me caring for Sakura and Takeshi every day, evidence of me being a devoted hands-on mother. We had testimony from neighbors at our old apartment building, saying they had seen me constantly with the children while Kenji was rarely home. The judge listened to everything. He was an older man in his 60s with a stern expression. Then he said something I will never forget. He said the principle of continuity was very important in Japanese custody decisions, that these children had been living with their father for 4 months now, that they had adjusted to their current living situation, that moving them back to me now would cause disruption and instability. Furthermore, he said, the father was Japanese with stable employment and family support in Japan, while I was a foreign national who had expressed uncertainty about remaining in Japan long-term. In the best interests of the children, custody was awarded to the father. I felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. Robert immediately filed a notice of appeal, but he warned me that appeals in Japanese custody cases almost never succeeded. The principle of continuity was sacred in Japanese family law. Whoever had physical possession of the children maintained custody. Always. The appeal was denied 3 months later. The appellate court said the lower court had correctly applied the law and principles. Kenji was awarded sole custody and full parental authority over both children. I was granted visitation. Once per month for 2 hours, supervised at a family center. Once a month, 2 hours, supervised. That was 6 years ago. Sakura is now 10 years old. Takeshi is 8. I see them once a month for 2 hours if Kenji does not cancel, which he does sometimes. He says the children are busy with school activities or that they are sick, or that they do not want to come. When I try to reschedule the canceled visits, he says his schedule is full, and we will just have to wait until the next regular visit. There is no enforcement mechanism for visitation in Japan. The court order says I have visitation rights, but if the custodial parent decides not to allow visits, there is nothing the non-custodial parent can do. The police will not help. The courts will not hold him in contempt. You are completely at the mercy of your ex-spouse's goodwill. Sakura barely remembers living with me anymore. She has lived with her father and grandmother for 6 years now, more than half her life. When I see her during our brief visits, she is polite, but distant. She speaks to me primarily in Japanese, even though I always try to speak English with her. Her English has deteriorated significantly over the years because Kenji does not encourage her to maintain it. Takeshi was so young when Kenji took him that he has almost no memory of me at all. He was 2 years old. To him, I am just this foreign lady he sees once a month at the family center, not his mother in any meaningful sense. Grandmother Yuki is the one who raised him day to day. She is the one he calls for when he is hurt or scared. When I bring them books in English or toys from America, they show polite interest but clearly do not connect with them. When I try to tell them stories about when they were babies, when we all lived together, when I was the one taking care of them every day, they look at me like I am talking about someone else's life. They do not remember. They were too young, and 6 years is a very long time. Kenji remarried 2 years ago, a Japanese woman named Naoko, who now helps raise my children. Sakura has mentioned that Naoko is nice, that she makes good bentos for school lunch, that she helps with homework. In Japanese culture, it is common for step-parents to legally adopt children from previous marriages. Kenji has mentioned that Naoko wants to adopt Sakura and Takeshi formally. If that happens, I will lose even the minimal rights I have now. Under Japanese law, Kenji has sole parental authority. He can make that adoption decision without my consent. I am completely powerless to stop it. I have been back to court multiple times over the past 6 years, asking for more visitation time, asking for overnight visits, asking for anything beyond 2 hours once a month. Every single time, the judge says the current arrangement is appropriate, that increasing visitation would disrupt the children's stability and routine. I have written letters to Japanese government officials pointing out how unjust this system is. I have contacted the American embassy over and over. No one can help. Everyone says this is a domestic Japanese legal matter and they cannot intervene. I have spent over $100,000 on lawyers fighting for my children. I maxed out every credit card I had. My parents helped financially as much as they could, but they are not wealthy. I worked 3 jobs at one point just to afford the ongoing legal fees, and I lost everything anyway. I still only see my children 2 hours per month. I think about leaving Japan all the time, going back to Seattle where my family is, where I could rebuild some kind of life. But if I leave, I will lose even the once-monthly visits. I will never see Sakura and Takeshi again, so I am trapped here, living in a tiny studio apartment in a suburb of Tokyo, teaching English online to pay my bills, spending every day waiting for that one visit each month. Last month during our visit, Sakura asked me why we do not live together. She said her friend's parents are divorced, but the friend still sees both parents regularly, stays at each parent's house on alternating weeks. She asked why she only sees me once a month at this center. I tried to explain in a way she could understand. I said that in Japan, when parents separate, usually only one parent has custody and the other parent gets limited visits. That daddy has custody so you live with him, and I get to see you once a month. She said, but why? Why does it have to be that way? I did not have a good answer. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that the legal system in her country is fundamentally unjust? That it treats children like property to be possessed rather than human beings with relationships to both parents? I just said, I do not know, sweetheart, but I love you so much. I wish I could see you more. She nodded sadly. Then our 2 hours were up, and she had to leave. I have joined support groups for foreign parents in Japan who have lost custody. There are hundreds of us. Mothers and fathers from America, from Europe, from Australia, all with essentially the same story. Our Japanese spouses took our children, usually without warning, and Japanese courts gave them custody because they had physical possession first. One father I know, an American man named David, has not seen his daughter in 7 years. His Japanese ex-wife took her and moved to a different prefecture. He was granted visitation, but the mother never shows up for the scheduled visits. The court will not enforce the visitation order. The police say it is a civil matter, and they will not get involved. He sends letters and birthday presents to her last known address, but has no idea if she ever receives them. Another mother, a British woman named Helen, had her 3 children taken by her Japanese ex-husband. She fought in court for 2 years, and was granted visitation of 4 hours once a month with all 3 children together. The father has slowly been cutting her off. First, he moved 2 hours away, making it difficult for her to get to visits. Then he started canceling visits, claiming the children were sick or had school obligations. She has seen her children twice in the past year. These stories are absolutely heartbreaking, and they happen constantly in Japan because of the broken custody system. Japan did finally join the Hague Convention in 2014, many years after most developed nations. The Hague Convention is an international treaty meant to prevent international parental child abduction. If a parent wrongfully takes a child across borders from their country of residence, the Hague Convention is supposed to facilitate the child's return. But the Hague Convention only applies to international abduction cases, where one parent takes a child from one country to another. It does not apply to domestic cases where both parents live in Japan. And even for international cases, Japan's implementation of the Hague Convention has been weak and slow. Cases take years. Courts still tend to favor keeping children in Japan with the Japanese parent. The fundamental problem is that Japanese family law is based on a completely different philosophy than Western family law. In the West, the prevailing view is that children benefit from having relationships with both parents after divorce, that even when parents separate, both should remain actively involved in their children's lives. In Japan, the philosophy is that divorce severs the family unit. The children stay with one parent, and the other parent essentially ceases to be part of their family. This is rooted in the Japanese family registry system, the koseki. When you divorce, you are removed from your ex-spouse's family register. You are no longer considered part of that family unit, and by extension, your relationship to the children from that marriage is severed as well. This system is devastating for children. Numerous studies show that children who lose contact with one parent after divorce have higher rates of depression, anxiety, behavioral problems, and academic difficulties. But Japanese courts do not seem to prioritize those concerns. They prioritize what they call stability and continuity, which in practice means maintaining the status quo and not disrupting whatever living arrangement currently exists. I have thought many times about trying to take Sakura and Takeshi back, about waiting outside their school, taking them, and getting to the airport, and on a plane back to America before anyone could stop us. But I cannot do it. First, because I would be arrested for parental kidnapping, a serious crime in Japan. I would go to prison. And even if I somehow managed to get the children out of Japan, Kenji would file for their return under the Hague Convention, and American courts would almost certainly send them back to Japan. And I would still end up in Japanese prison and would lose my children permanently. Second, because I do not want to traumatize Sakura and Takeshi the way I was traumatized when Kenji took them. They have been raised by their father and grandmother for 6 years. To them, that is their life, their family, their stability. If I suddenly abducted them and took them to a foreign country, it would be terrifying and confusing. I would become the villain in their story, the unstable foreign mother who kidnapped them from their real family. So I stay. I wait. I show up for my once-monthly visits when I am allowed, and I hope that someday, when Sakura and Takeshi are adults, they will want to know me. They will want to understand what really happened. They will want to have a relationship with me. Sakura will be 18 in 8 years. Takeshi will be 18 in 10 years. When they are legal adults, they can make their own choices about whether to have contact with me. But that is 8 to 10 more years of minimal contact. 8 to 10 more years of them forgetting who I am, forgetting that I loved them, forgetting that I ever mattered. I do not know if I can survive that psychologically, but I have to try, because they are my children. And someday, I hope they will understand that everything I have done, all the fighting and the refusing to give up, has been because I love them more than anything. I want every foreign parent considering marrying a Japanese person and moving to Japan to understand what you are risking. If your marriage fails, if your Japanese spouse decides to leave with your children, you will have almost no legal recourse. The police will not help because spousal child abduction is not considered a crime in Japan if you are still married. The courts will give custody to whoever has physical possession. You will lose your children. The only way to protect yourself is to be the one who leaves first if separation is inevitable. Get physical possession of the children and do not let go. I know that sounds terrible. I know it sounds like I am advocating for parental kidnapping. But in Japan's legal system, that is the only way to have any chance of custody. Whoever has the children wins. I wish I had known that. I wish someone had warned me. I wish I had understood Japanese family law before I married Kenji and had children in Japan. But I did not know, and I paid for my ignorance with my children. This is my story, but it is the story of thousands of parents in Japan, both foreign and Japanese. We are the left-behind parents. The ones who lost our children to a legal system that does not value the parent-child relationship, that treats children like property to be possessed, that refuses to enforce visitation or shared parenting. If you are going through something similar, know that you are not alone. There are advocacy groups working to change Japanese custody law. There is growing international pressure on Japan to reform its system. Change is slow, but it is happening. Do not give up hope. And if this story opened your eyes to something you did not know was happening, please share it. Please help other foreign parents understand the risks before they marry someone from Japan and move there with children. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so you do not miss more stories about parents fighting impossible custody battles around the world. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being here.